Jess, in our last video, we were talking about relationships and image, and you had mentioned something about um, what happens behind closed doors in relationships, and I was curious about that.
Okay. I think that especially when it comes to image, in any relationship, there can be a real shame attached to what happens when that relationship is not as glossy as we want other people to see it. And when we're talking about this aspect of image in relationships, in our last video, it made me realize that when that relationship is disintegrating and you have all these people who are celebrating this queer relationship, it can be incredibly isolating in knowing how to speak out to that, especially because we fought so hard to have that relationship in the first place.
Absolutely.
And to come to terms with ourselves and being able to say, yes, this is mine. We want it to be a utopia. We want it to be something that's a celebration, especially during Pride. What happens when it's not? Yeah.
And I think it's a real challenge when you realize the complexity of asking for help to get out of a relationship that's no longer healthy, when a lot of the people in your life may have not wanted you to be in that relationship to begin with. How do you say, I need help getting out of a queer relationship that you told me was wrong to begin with?
Yes. In fact, it actually really reminds me of this incredible book that I read. I brought it. It's called In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. And this book is one of the most profound accounts I've actually read. And I've read a lot on abuse, especially because I specialize in it, but on woman-to-woman abuse and what that looks like. What Carmen Maria Machado is able to do is she's able to talk about this aspect of the utopia that women can be seen to have within lesbian relationships or within queer relationships. And the shame that can be attached to having abuse of all forms, but specifically in this instance, emotional abuse. Wow, it really struck a chord with me, because what Carmen's able to do is not only talk about her own experience as a memoir, but she's able to open up a conversation that's often silenced. How do we experience emotional abuse? How do we experience emotional abuse at the hand of a partner of our same sexual expression? And what happens when we don't want to shame that partner? What Machado's able to do is actually say, I don't want her to look bad. I don't want her to make the community look bad. And she has this line where she's referencing something else where she says, I don't want to kind of convict another queer sister. And that can happen a lot when it comes to abuse.
Absolutely.
And that can happen a lot in how we start to think, is this just my experience? How do I reach out for help? And what do we need to do to combat that? I think a book like this actually starts to do it, because she's able to allow herself to be the vulnerable subject, which I think is really important. A lot of times we'll talk about this, as you and I will know, as academics, we'll talk about our work, but to have that vulnerability displayed on the page is so important for other people being able to speak out about it, their experiences.
Yeah, and one of the things we're celebrating during Pride is the success in gaining marriage rights in some countries. And what we don't as often talk about in that conversation is, what about divorce in the queer community?
Yeah.
What about abuse in the queer community, as you're illustrating? And what about that experience that so often emotional abuse is minimized?
Yes.
It's minimized. Oh, well, it wasn't physical.
Yeah.
But it can be such a severe experience that can have lifelong impacts.
Oh, absolutely. What author Carmen Maria Machado talks about is actually how shocking it is how many forms of abuse are legal because they're not physical.
Yeah.
And emotional abuse, no matter what relationship you're in, cuts you to the core. And what happens with emotional abuse often is a term that's associated with it, which is gaslighting. gaslighting is an experience where your pain is denied, which then gets turned inward, where we start to doubt our very reality. And what gaslighting has is this duality where not only is something done to us, it's then denied, and we turn that pain inside. And emotional abuse is such an insidious form of abuse because we almost can deny that we need help. And that especially is the case within queer relationships. How do we get out of something that people didn't want us in to begin with? How do we start to admit this? And where is a safe place to start to do that, I guess?
Yeah, and I absolutely have experienced as a therapist that people coming in for therapy about relationship issues, ultimately that might become a space where we talk about what they've experienced, and we're able to identify that was really abusive, what you experienced or what you are experiencing. And that can be the first place where the gaslighting is removed, where someone says, your experience is real, and it had a real impact on you.
Yeah. I think if you are suffering from any form of abuse, you're not alone, and it's real, and you need to know that. And there are people who want to be there for you. There are friends that want to be there for you. There's family. There are psychotherapists. And the first step is simply listening to this message and thinking, maybe that's me. That's the first step. You've already done it. And so I can't urge you enough to nod your head to this if you are facing this abuse, and just know that help can be something that you can seek. Thank you so much for joining us for today's video, and we hope you can join us for our next in the LGBTQI Pride video series for Centered Self.